Why would a 19-year-old franchise cornerstone's ankle injury send shockwaves through an organization's entire decision-making process? On Wednesday night, Dallas Mavericks rookie Cooper Flagg left the game against the Denver Nuggets with a left ankle sprain. The injury occurred in the first half while Flagg was defending Peyton Watson. He grabbed his left ankle immediately, was helped to his feet, and walked off the court under his own power, though he could not put weight on the injured ankle. The Mavericks ruled him out for the remainder of the game. Flagg, the first overall pick in the 2025 NBA Draft, is just 19 years old. No official timeline or severity update has been announced by the team. For most rookies, an ankle injury represents a temporary setback, painful, frustrating, but ultimately routine in the physical grind of an NBA season. But for a player selected first overall, someone around whom an entire franchise's future has been constructed, the calculus becomes far more complicated. And according to sources close to the Dallas organization, Flagg's injury has triggered internal discussions that extend well beyond simple injury management. People familiar with the matter say the atmosphere inside the Mavericks facility shifted dramatically in the hours following Flagg's exit from Wednesday's game. According to those briefed on internal discussions, the front office immediately began evaluating not just the immediate roster implications, but broader questions about minutes management, developmental timelines, and the balance between short-term competitiveness and long-term player protection. Sources say these conversations had been simmering beneath the surface for weeks, but crystallized into urgent debate once Flagg was ruled out. What hasn't been reported publicly, according to people close to the organization, is that Dallas's coaching staff and front office had been engaged in ongoing discussions about Flagg's workload well before Wednesday's injury. Sources say there had been private debates about whether a 19-year-old, regardless of talent level, should be logging the minutes and usage rate that Flagg had been carrying. People familiar with these earlier conversations describe a tension between maximizing the team's current playoff positioning and protecting the long-term health of their most valuable asset. Behind the scenes, according to those briefed on the situation, the coaching staff had reportedly been monitoring Flagg's physical condition closely throughout the early portion of the season. While no specific medical concerns had been raised publicly, sources say there were internal discussions about the cumulative physical toll of an NBA season on a teenage body still developing. People familiar with these evaluations describe conversations about load management strategies and whether Dallas should proactively reduce Flagg's minutes, even when he appeared healthy and productive. The injury on Wednesday, according to sources close to the organization, brought these simmering debates to an immediate head. What had been theoretical discussions about workload and sustainability suddenly became concrete decisions with real consequences. People familiar with the immediate aftermath say the front office convened quickly to discuss not just Flagg's return timeline, which remained unknown pending further evaluation, but the broader philosophical approach to managing their franchise player for the remainder of the season. According to those briefed on these discussions, there was reportedly significant division within the Mavericks organization about the appropriate path forward once Flagg is cleared to return. One faction, sources say, argued that Dallas should adopt a cautious, conservative approach, limiting Flagg's minutes, potentially holding him out of back-to-back games, and prioritizing his long-term development over immediate winning. This group reportedly pointed to the organization's investment in Flagg as a generational talent, whose career arc spans the next 15 years, not just this season. But another faction within the organization, according to people familiar with the internal debates, pushed back against what they viewed as overcautious thinking. Sources say this group argued that Flagg was drafted first overall precisely because he was ready to contribute immediately, that excessive load management could hinder his development and competitive instincts, and that the team had playoff aspirations that required Flagg's presence on the court. People briefed on these arguments described presentations emphasizing the importance of building winning habits and playoff experience for young players, rather than sheltering them from competition. What made the situation particularly complex, according to sources close to the Mavericks, was the uncertainty surrounding the injury itself. With no official timeline or severity assessment announced, people familiar with the matter say the front office found itself making contingency plans for multiple scenarios. Sources describe discussions about short-term roster adjustments, potential rotation changes, and how the team would maintain competitiveness during whatever absence Flagg might face. Behind the scenes, according to those briefed on the situation, General Manager Nico Harrison found himself navigating competing organizational priorities. People familiar with Harrison's thinking say he understood both perspectives, the need to protect a generational talent and the desire to build a winning culture that includes the team's best players. Sources describe Harrison as someone caught between ownership's expectations for immediate playoff success and a responsibility to safeguard the franchise's long-term foundation. The coaching staff's position, according to people close to the team, added another layer of complexity to these discussions. Sources say head coach Jason Kidd and his assistants valued Flagg's impact on both ends of the floor and had built significant portions of their offensive and defensive schemes around his versatility. People familiar with coaching staff conversations describe debates about whether reducing Flagg's minutes would compromise the team's identity, or whether alternative rotations could maintain competitiveness while reducing physical demands on the rookie. What hasn't been discussed publicly, according to sources, is how the injury affected Dallas's broader season planning. People familiar with internal projections say the front office had been modeling different scenarios for the remainder of the season, with Flagg's health and availability as a central variable in each calculation. The ankle injury, regardless of its ultimate severity, reportedly forced the organization to confront the reality that their franchise player's body might not be invincible, despite his talent level. According to those briefed on the matter, there were reportedly ongoing discussions about minutes distribution and rotational philosophy that predated Wednesday's injury. Sources say some within the organization had advocated for a more measured approach to Flagg's deployment, perhaps capping him at 30 minutes per game, giving him scheduled rest games, or reducing his defensive assignments against particularly physical opponents. But people familiar with these earlier debates say there had been resistance to implementing such restrictions when Flagg appeared healthy and the team was competing for playoff positioning. The injury, according to sources close to the situation, shifted the terms of that debate. What had been abstract discussions about workload philosophy became concrete questions about immediate roster construction. People familiar with the post-injury conversations describe urgent evaluations of which players would absorb Flagg's minutes, how offensive and defensive schemes would adjust, and whether the team's competitive aspirations remained realistic during whatever absence might follow. What complicated the evaluation, according to those briefed on internal discussions, was the lack of comparable precedent for managing a 19-year-old first overall pick with franchise-altering talent. Sources say the front office had studied how other organizations handled similar situations, but acknowledged that each player's physical development and injury history creates unique circumstances that don't allow for simple template solutions. Behind the scenes, according to people familiar with the matter, there were reportedly discussions about whether Dallas should adopt a more conservative philosophy even before receiving official medical updates about the ankle injury. Some within the organization, sources say, argued that the injury served as a warning sign, that regardless of its severity, it demonstrated the physical risks inherent in playing a teenager heavy minutes in an 82-game season. This group reportedly advocated for immediately implementing load management protocols once Flagg returned, treating the injury as a catalyst for philosophical change rather than just a temporary setback. But others within the Mavericks organization, according to those briefed on the debates, cautioned against overreaction. People familiar with these arguments say there were concerns that excessive caution could send the wrong message to both Flagg and the locker room, that it might undermine confidence or create a culture of fragility rather than resilience. Sources describe presentations arguing that part of player development involves learning to manage the physical demands of a full NBA season rather than being sheltered from them. The medical staff's role, according to people close to the organization, became central to these discussions. Sources say the team's medical personnel were tasked with providing not just immediate injury assessment, but broader guidance about age-appropriate workloads and sustainable usage patterns for a 19-year-old player. People familiar with these consultations describe conversations about physical development timelines and how bodies continue maturing into the early 20s, creating considerations that don't apply to veteran players. What remained uncertain in the days following the injury, according to those close to the situation, was how aggressively Dallas would modify their approach once Flagg returned to action. Sources say there was genuine disagreement within the organization about whether the injury represented a random occurrence or a symptom of broader workload concerns. People familiar with the internal debates describe competing interpretations of the same event, some viewing it as bad luck, others as a predictable consequence of asking too much too soon from a teenage body. The ownership group's perspective, according to those briefed on their thinking, reportedly emphasized both competitiveness and long-term value protection. Sources say Mavericks ownership understood the fan and organizational expectations for playoff success, but also recognized that Flagg represented potentially a decade-plus of elite production if managed properly. People familiar with ownership's position describe a mandate to the front office and coaching staff to find the right balance rather than prioritizing either extreme. League-wide, according to sources familiar with broader NBA discussions, other organizations were watching Dallas's handling of the situation closely. People briefed on these conversations say several teams with young franchise players faced similar questions about workload management and developmental philosophy. The precedent Dallas set, sources say, could influence how other organizations approached comparable situations with their own teenage stars. What became clear in the hours and days following Wednesday's injury, according to those close to the Mavericks, was that the organization faced a decision that transcended immediate roster management. Sources describe this as a defining moment for how Dallas would approach player development and franchise building, whether they would prioritize short-term success or long-term sustainability, whether they would err on the side of caution or competition. As medical evaluations continued and the organization awaited official updates on Flagg's injury status, one thing was certain. The Mavericks had been forced to confront difficult questions about how to protect their most valuable asset while pursuing their competitive goals. Would they emerge from this situation with a more conservative, protective approach to their 19-year-old franchise cornerstone? Or would they maintain their current philosophy, trusting that Flagg's talent and resilience would carry him through the physical demands of NBA competition? Inside the Mavericks organization, sources say, that decision remained unresolved. If you found this breakdown insightful, take a moment to like the video. It helps this story reach more basketball fans who care about what happens beyond the box score. For more NBA stories inspired by real news, told with depth, context, and realism, subscribe to Beyond the Hardwood. And if you want to be here when the next chapter unfolds, turn on notifications so you don't miss our next investigation. Let us know what you think in the comments. Was this the right move? Or is there more beneath the surface? Until next time, this is Beyond the Hardwood.